Hello again, wait, am I muted? Yes, hello and welcome to the United Nations Big Data Forum 2021. Welcome to session 6 of day 1, which is titled Creating a Robotics Industry in Trinidad and Tobago. My name is Serjan Derek. I am the team leader of the Resident Coordinator Office for the United Nations in Trinidad and Tobago. And it is my great pleasure today to moderate this session, which will be keynoted by Mr. Vijay Pradeep, the CEO of Virtana, who will later on, after his presentation, be joined by Mr. Darren Mohammed from Microsoft Caribbean and Mr. Inzamam Rahaman, the senior data scientist at the Guardian Group. Just very quickly to introduce our guest today, Mr. Pradeep is a robotics engineer and an angel investor and has been involved in the robotics sector for over a decade. He moved to Trinidad in 2017 and started Virtana, a robotics software development and outsourcing company, aiming to grow the Caribbean's impact in the global robotics ecosystem. Since then, as Virtana's CEO, Vijay has grown the Virtana team to over 20 people and established collaborations with robotics companies all over the world, including tech giants such as Google, to help build the next generation of robotic solutions, all the while sitting right here in Trinidad and Tobago. He will be joined later on after his presentation by Mr. Darren Mohammed, who is a solution specialist manager at Microsoft. He is responsible for the corporate and government business across 33 countries, mainly within the Caribbean, and he's also the country representative for Microsoft in Trinidad and Tobago. Meanwhile, Mr. Rahaman, who is the senior data scientist at the Guardian Group and a PhD candidate at the University of West Indies, is specializing in machine learning, graph mining, algorithmic game theory, computational social science, and operations research. He has published 11 peer-reviewed articles in several ACMs, IEEE, and Springer venues. His current thesis work is centered on understanding, modeling, predicting, and intervening in online social networks impacted by antagonistic relationships and polarization. Before joining the Guardian Group, he taught at the University of West Indies on different aspects of artificial intelligence, data science, software engineering, and theoretical computer science. I think we are in very good hands with these three gentlemen here today. For all of you attending and in the audience, please use the Q&A section, the button that you can see at the bottom of your screen, to ask any questions that I can then pose to the panel after Mr. Pradeep's presentation is done. Without further ado, let me pass the floor now to Mr. Vijay Pradeep, the CEO of Virtana, who will start his presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Serjan, and thank you for having me here today. So good afternoon, everyone. And Serjan was already able to give a little bit of introduction as to what I've been up to. And yeah, I really wanted to spend this time to tell you a little bit more about this company that I started recently called Virtana. And as mentioned, Virtana is a robotics software development company based locally in Trinidad that develops robotic solutions for global customers, including Google's robotics and machine learning teams. And over the past 4 years, we've grown to over 18 people, all based out of Trinidad. And looking further ahead, I see Virtana continuing to grow and becoming a bigger player in the global robotics ecosystem. But on the flip side, we're going to need more than just one successful robotics company if we're going to build a robotics ecosystem right here in Trinidad and Tobago. As such, I'd love to tell you more about how Virtana ended up getting to where we are today, what we're trying to achieve locally and globally, and what I think needs to happen to truly create a robotics and technology ecosystem right here in Trinidad and Tobago. Looking back before starting Virtana, I spent 14 years in Silicon Valley. I finished university with a mix of mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and computer science, and I had an opportunity to work on a variety of exciting robotics projects. While at Stanford, I was able to help build the first wave of prototype drone technologies, which helped lead to many of the consumer drones that you can buy in stores today. And for those of you who remember Rosie from the Jetsons, I had an opportunity to join a robotics think tank that built a personal robot assistant that could grab drinks out of a refrigerator, among other things. I then had an opportunity to build electric flying cars at Larry Page's secret air taxi startup. And after that, I was able to start a company called Hideoff that helped bring many of these robotic technologies from research labs to real world applications, which led to Hideoff being acquired by Google, where I then became an engineering manager developing various new virtual reality and augmented reality systems. And being able to experience Silicon Valley from all these different perspectives, there was one key component that both Silicon Valley and Trinidad and Tobago shared, which was a supply of raw talent. Prior to moving to Trinidad, I was able to meet with various people connected to the University of the West Indies. And what I saw was a steady stream of graduates, students, young professionals who have a fundamental excitement for pushing the boundaries of what's possible with technology. And this raw talent and growth is really the lifeblood of any tech ecosystem. And seeing this gave me the confidence and motivation to start Virtana. And by putting this raw talent in situations where they need to really push their own thinking, we've been able to create a world-class team that is able to tackle robotics challenges with world-class international clients. We've built navigation systems for drones the size of cars. We've built algorithmic models of bulldozers and excavators to help automate these machines. And we've built simulations of factory robots to help train the next generation of machine learning and artificial intelligence systems. We even have a team of remote robot operators that are testing, debugging, and controlling robot arms in a warehouse facility in Silicon Valley using advanced technologies like virtual reality, all while sitting right here in Trinidad. So we have the raw talent to feed into this ecosystem, but what else do we need? Well, the first piece of this puzzle in building this ecosystem is to put this raw talent in situations where they have an opportunity to solve really big and ambiguous problems. University graduates in TNT have strong fundamentals, and they're able to quickly and efficiently solve textbook problems. However, tackling real-world problems rarely looks like this. And in most cases, we end up spending much of our time at Virtana trying to even figure out what the problem we're trying to actually solve is. And then once we define it, the solutions could rely on a variety of different technical experience with no one right answer. So let's maybe change things up a little bit and see if we can, as a group on this Zoom call, start thinking about and tackling one potential problem. So suppose we wanted to develop a system for delivering doubles to people's front doors. How might we do this? So for everyone in the session, feel free to open the Zoom chat and suggest any ideas that you might have. And while you're doing that, for those of you who maybe aren't from Trinidad or haven't tried doubles before, you really need to come visit because doubles are absolutely delicious. So for everyone that's watching here, anyone want to throw in any ideas or maybe how to solve this problem, delivering doubles? Right here. Cool, so we have one person here that mentioned drone delivery. Thanks, Jenny, for that suggestion. That's awesome. So yeah, we have some drones. They pick up the doubles from each double stand and then drop them off on people's front doors. Awesome. Cool. And then some folks have been thinking about maybe using something on the ground, like an autonomous vehicle. Okay, that's one way of doing it too. That makes a lot of sense. To use that autonomous vehicle technology and actually drive from the double stand and actually drop it off at someone's front door. And then, yeah, it looks like there's some people here as well that have ideas that don't even involve robots. Even better, even simpler to implement. So using a food delivery service where you actually have local taxis that pick up the doubles and deliver them. Some people are even suggesting using blockchain to try to manage some of the orders and maybe drones built connected to the blockchain. This is awesome. There's a lot of different ways of solving this from a bunch of different avenues. And any of these technical solutions could potentially work. And once we decide on one of the solutions, we're actually going to have to start implementing it. And let's maybe change things up a bit for a second. And we should maybe think, maybe zoom out a little bit further here. So for some of you who might be connoisseurs of doubles, you might even say that this idea of delivering doubles is doomed from the start, not because the technical approach we're considering, but because doubles should always be eaten fresh, piping hot at a double stand, and never reheated and never delivered. In that case, the delivery technology might be the right solution, but just not for doubles. So maybe delivering medicine and pharmaceuticals instead of doubles is the more effective way to have an impact locally. And if you're in some of the earlier sessions today, you would have seen that there was actually a talk from the folks at Metal who are doing exactly that in Trinidad and Tobago. As another example, we were recently working with a local manufacturing company that was looking for a technology solution to help keep track of small parts in their inventory. And after digging into the problem further, we realized that we could actually apply that technology to a totally different application, counting pills in pharmacies. As such, we've been developing a new internet-enabled device that enables pharmacies to more efficiently count pills and track their inventory. This lets pharmacies spend less time counting pills and more time listening to patients' needs, and thus help patients make safer and more informed decisions about their health. We've already started pilot programs of the technology, both in the private sector as well as the public health system. And by enabling pharmacies to track how their inventory evolves over time, all from a smartphone, we've now created an entry point for this entire sector to drive their own digital transformation. And as part of this development, we're grateful to have grant funding from the Caribbean Export Development Agency, the Caribbean Development Bank, and the European Union to augment our own financial investments in the project. Another key component to growing this raw talent is mentorship. And most technical knowledge these days can be found in textbooks, blog posts, and research papers. And mentorship can help point raw talent in the right direction to learn the relevant material. But much more importantly, mentorship can also help raw talent develop the tools, strategies, and skills needed to think about and begin tackling much larger problems. And when many of us think about growth in the workplace, we often think of it as a steady march towards honing our skills to slowly but surely fulfilling our job responsibilities. However, at Virtana, we view the growth of our team, we view the growth of our team members very differently. By heavily investing our time into mentoring new staff and giving them responsibilities that are often more than what they're used to, it might make them take longer to really have an impact at the company, but it also gives them the tools, skills, and confidence needed to tackle our bigger and most transformative projects. At Virtana, we've seen that it often takes 6 months of focused mentorship before we begin to see the positive impact of a new employee. And after that, it often takes another 12 to 18 months of continued guidance and mentorship for them to really begin to excel at a level that clients expect from a world-class engineering team. And this investment in mentorship is actually the biggest bottleneck in Virtana's own growth. We've actually been turning down new projects and work because we don't have the bandwidth to mentor many more new engineers. Nonetheless, we already have 4 engineers at Virtana that are managing and mentoring their own teams, and we're quickly creating new mentors as we quickly are creating new mentors as we speak. And if there was a robotics ecosystem that we could hire from, we'd be able to grow even more rapidly by hiring senior engineers who have already gained relevant experience instead of requiring us to always hire raw talent. And it might be counterintuitive, but one of the core pieces needed for teams and people to succeed is to give them room to fail. Pretty much by definition, the road to building new technologies has never been charted. So there will surely be dead ends along the way. However, the most important thing is that every person involved is able to learn from those experiences and use that to make a better next decision. And in one instance, we had 2 engineers developing a new type of robot simulation for machine learning. 6 months into that project, we realized that the tool that we built our platform on wasn't going to meet all of our needs. And we could have decided to keep pushing forward and deliver a usable but fairly mediocre product. However, we instead decided to scrap that entire code base, tens of thousands of lines of code, and regroup. But remember that we didn't walk away empty-handed from that experience. And during those 6 months, we had learned much more about the problem we were tackling, and we were able to chart a new path forward using this wealth of additional context. That effort has now turned into a much bigger collaboration with an international client, enabling Virtana to help revolutionize how machine learning is done with robot arms for factory and warehouse applications. So at Virtana, we've been doing what we think is critical to building a world-class team that can tackle world-class technology challenges. We've been giving our team opportunities to solve big, ambiguous problems. We've given them the mentorship they need to accelerate their own growth, and we've given our team room to take chances on new approaches and also learn from our mistakes when we fail. We've built a successful local company by doing this, but we're still quite far from building a local robotics industry and ecosystem, and we can't achieve all of this on our own. Building this bigger tech ecosystem is going to require changes in our culture and mindset across everyone involved, including business leaders, students, technology professionals, and government stakeholders. So to the business community, I call upon all of you to hire and mentor local talent. And I don't mean this just to work on well-scoped day-to-day business goals, but to put them in roles where they have an opportunity to truly implement new ideas or technologies that could transform your business or even spawn new business units. The best and brightest local talent are looking for how they can have the most impact. And if that happens to be with companies that are abroad, then they're going to leave, resulting in even more so-called brain drain in the region. And when local businesses are able to convince local talent to stay and work on big transformative problems, it needs to be done with the understanding that there will be many missteps, iterations, and learnings along the way before it bears any tangible impact to the organization. Mentorship can always accelerate this progress, and instead of hiring foreign experts and consultants to solve local problems, consider hiring these same experts to instead teach your team how to solve these problems. And there already are some organizations like TTLAB, led by Dr. Patrick Hossain, that are using local talent to solve deeply technical problems. And you can hear more about his organization tomorrow during the Big Data Forum. But instead of examples like Virtana and TTLAB being a special case, this should really be the norm in every business sector in the region. And the easy business answer is to say that maybe local talent is too raw to solve our local problems, or that a foreign expert will be able to solve the problem faster than someone locally. But if we don't change our mindset, we'll forever be an importer of technology from other ecosystems instead of building our own and exporting it. To governments in the region, I fully acknowledge that their primary goal is to address the immediate needs of their citizens, which often means purchasing and deploying solutions from foreign companies. However, looking longer term, it's as important, or maybe even more important, to make a conscious effort to invest in locally developed solutions. And just a few days ago, Prime Minister Mia Mottley of Barbados announced that they rolled out their digital corporate registry fully developed and maintained in Barbados. This is a great first step. And I'd also encourage governments to consider taking bigger technology risks that businesses often can't. For instance, government organizations in the USA, like DARPA, regularly invest in ambitious private projects and challenges, knowing quite well that the projects may not be successful. But they also know the secondary effects of these investments build entire ecosystems. For instance, the current autonomous car revolution was sparked by a DARPA initiative in the US. And I'm not asking the Caribbean to spearhead the development of self-driving cars, but rather for the Caribbean to invest in developing new technologies that are especially relevant to island nations. For instance, Trinidad and Tobago is extremely well positioned to develop border security technologies that could help address smuggling and human trafficking, which could then be exported to numerous coastal countries. The Caribbean could also become a leader in technologies like IoT, Internet of Things, and drones to revitalize the agricultural sector, maybe even detect illegal quarrying, and even prevent crime. And next, to the students and technology professionals here, I'd encourage all of you to identify problems worth solving and then actually attempt to solve them. This could mean using your experience day-to-day on the job to identify pain points in your company, or maybe chatting with an aunt or uncle that operates a small business that is hoping to better utilize technology. And even if your ideas or proposals are rejected, understanding why they're rejected will give you additional context to iterate on even more effective solutions. And if your manager doesn't like your idea simply because they think there aren't any problems that need to be solved, then it also might be time to look for a new job. And if you happen to be looking for an internship or job, look for the opportunities that give you a chance to tackle big, ambiguous problems with mentors that are invested in your own growth. And by the way, Virtana is also hiring. So at Virtana, we've been able to take one step in the right direction towards bringing the robotics revolution to Trinidad and Tobago. But we also didn't do this on our own. What we've built thus far at Virtana wouldn't have been possible without the entire Virtana team and their steadfast belief in our vision. We're also thankful for the help of the University of the West Indies, especially Dr. Fazil Medina and Dr. Akash Puran Singh, through whom we've been able to build stronger connections between the university and Virtana to help nurture the raw talent that's so vital to our local tech ecosystem. And finally, I wanted to thank my wife, Dr. Rajini Harak Singh, for helping us apply the Silicon Valley mindset to the local context and help us build a company culture at Virtana that we're truly proud of. And overall, with the help of stakeholders locally and regionally, I really believe that we can make Trinidad and Tobago a major player in the global robotics and technology ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vijay, for that presentation. It was an absolute pleasure to listen to it, and it really sort of sets the stage for, I think, what will be a very interesting panel discussion about the future of robotics as an industry in Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, and this is for you and for the panel as well. But the immediate thought that comes to mind based on this presentation is, are we adequately prepared as a country in Trinidad and Tobago for the changes that will be fashioned by the emergence of a robotics industry? Is the country equipped for the surging adoption of robotics and AI when it comes to things such as employment, skills, training, and all these other aspects that form a future smart society?
Yeah, so I personally, thinking about Virtana, we've been really tackling only sort of one niche of how robotics can be applied locally locally and in the region. And I think it's important to think about technology from sort of maybe three different categories. There's consuming these advanced technologies, there's building businesses that are enabled by these technologies, and then there's actually building those technologies themselves. And I think we're going to see different parts of society participating in different aspects of this. So Virtana, we're heavily invested in building these new technologies, but we're also going to see entrepreneurs and other companies that are going to be utilizing more of these technologies. And then we're also going to see the broader population that maybe they're not going to be building it or building companies around it, but they're going to be consumers of it. And I think as a country and as a region, I think almost everyone here, if they're excited about embracing embracing this change, being exposed to these new technologies and making their lives better in a lot of ways, I think we're on the right path to at least participating in some of those, or everyone participating in at least some of those three areas.
Thank you. And Mr. Mohammed, just to bring you in, what do you think? I mean, in terms of Trinidad and Tobago's readiness for the emergence of robotics and the AI, how ready is the country?
Yeah, I mean, if you had asked me this question before the pandemic, I would say that we weren't very ready. I think that the pandemic actually created a sort of an acceleration, right, of that readiness. And just to give you an example, if you have a lockdown and you send home your workers and you're in the manufacturing sector, of course you can't manufacture if everything was not automated, right? So in other words, when that lockdown happened, a lot of these companies started thinking, we need to have this technology as part of our strategy. We need to start looking into automation, IoT, having a digital twin of our factory and so on, and then include it in the strategy. And I think that the strategy is going to be the first step. The second step really is for the local companies to build a culture of thinking of this technology as part of the go forward. So when you have a problem to solve, as Vijay was saying, that you're looking to this technology and you're saying, okay, I'm going to use digital first. I'm going to use, you know, I'm going to innovate. I'm going to do this locally, and I'm going to use that as my first go-to, and not try to solve the problem with, you know, large amounts of, you know, labor or you know, huge investments in that regard. And then it is to untap the potential of the people within the organization. So, you know, and that is building in-house technical capability, as Vijay was saying. You know, you have to think of your people. You have to think about reskilling your people. You have to think about, you know, what sort of contribution they're going to make in this sort of, you know, new, you know, now that it's built and part of the strategy. And there it's not that you leave the people behind. I mean, because these are the people who know the plant, who know the product, who know, you know, the long history of it and so on. And they have a lot to contribute. It really is about sort of tapping the potential that's in them and beyond them to build that technical capability.
I think, Darren, I think you mentioned something interesting there, which is sort of the pandemic catalyzing this change. And I think I agree with a lot of what you said, but there's also sort of a tricky counter side of that, which is everyone suddenly realized, oh, we need to embrace this change. We need to do it. And oh, by the way, we need to do it right now. Otherwise, our businesses will fail. And it's very hard to just overnight say, okay, now let's just reskill everybody. Let's like train everyone up. Let's like change the entire business. And that often results in, okay, now let's just pay a bunch of foreign experts to just solve it for us. And it makes it harder to sort of generally reskill the local population or put people in these roles, which I think is sort of the tough side of the pandemic with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Rahaman, yeah, if you feel to jump in, same question.
I would concur with my fellow panel members that you know, that the pandemic has catalyzed you know, making some inroads in towards making our society a bit more ready for these technologies, but also agree that sustainably for society to be sustainably capable of really you know, discharging technologies such as robotics and artificial intelligence, we need to establish appropriate pipelines that actually help upskill and develop the skills required to be able to actually leverage these technologies to solve our society's problems. In particular with education, I do think in the space of education, you know, some positive achievement has been made in the last couple of years. But I do think from the education system, from primary school all the way up into tertiary, there are some important changes that we would need to make in terms of helping to ready our population to actually participate in the development of these technologies. And in particular, in terms of readiness, an aspect, of course, that cannot be overlooked would be the legislative policy components. You know, with of course, artificial intelligence, there comes issues of data privacy, depending on the particular context in which artificial intelligence is actually discharged. So to ensure that the appropriate legislation and policies are there to ensure that the privacy and rights of users are protected, etc., as well as appropriate regulations to ensure appropriate standards adhered to when these technologies are actually used. I think that's a component where we can't overlook that of course needs some work.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Rahman. And just to stay with you, you know, the progression of machine learning and various technologies have been changing the functioning of different sectors all over the world. In some sector, there is a belief that employing data scientists is the model approach to ensuring readiness to embrace machine learning, data science, and robotics technology. Is this really an effective approach within the framework of developing a robotics industry? Or should our focus be on expanded education, capacity building, and skilling to complement the robotics technology?
I think it's not just an either. I think you'd actually need to definitely do both. You definitely need to hire and train appropriate numbers of data scientists to actually be able to leverage quote unquote data scientists, machine engineers and the like to be able to actually develop these technologies. But you would also, of course, need to ensure you have, you know, as for the pipelines to actually upskill the population writ large in using these technologies, because there's one aspect is development, But there's another side to that, that you need to have folks who may not necessarily be involved in the development of these technologies, but have to be responsible for deciding where and when these technologies will be used in the business context as well. So while, making sure that you have, the appropriate technical capacity is important, it's also important that you also have people who are not necessarily acting in those technical capacities, but are still appropriately apprised and educated on the technology to be able to decide, okay, these are effective spaces in which we can actually use these technologies.
Yes. And when you talk about upskilling there, sorry for jumping in there, Serjan, but no when we talk about upskilling people, I think it can be viewed as both a focused effort on like certain verticals or like a few select set of people, or it can be talk about like upskilling the entire population. And I think as a country, Trinidad and Tobago has done an excellent job of providing opportunities for much of the entire population to get tertiary education. Like that's been absolutely fantastic, and that is accessible to people. But I think the other thing that happens is, in my opinion, to really transform these industries and like really bring this technology locally, you also need to make sure that you're focusing a lot of energy in maybe the few select people that are extremely driven towards transformative change in the region. And I think what that means is providing the support for people that are maybe getting their bachelor's degree, which has already happened, but then also making sure that we have some follow through to some degree to even more advanced degrees. So whether that means master's degree, masters of philosophy, and even PhDs and doctorates. Because I think if we can channel energy there, those are the people that are really going to be able to create these new organizations that are going to do things very, very differently. And I think that happens a little bit less. And I think people often end up in their own in the academic system when they try to reach those higher levels of education.
Thank you. Thank you. To jump back to Mr. Mohammed, just earlier, I mean, literally a couple of hours ago, Mr. Louis, the General Manager and Chief Digital Transformation Officer for Microsoft Caribbean, was making the point that as part of the digital transformation at Microsoft, the company started questioning how can we unleash the power of AI. In preparation for a vibrant and transformative robotics industry, what do you see as necessary steps for business and public sector processes to adapt to the reality that AI and robotics are no longer science fiction?
Yeah, I mean, if for this one, I mean, you have to approach it from understanding, a couple of things about AI and then its relation to robotics. So, I mean, with robotics, I mean, you have, of course, the ability to code the robotics, right? So you have platforms for that, and then you have platforms where now you have the machines and you have to build awareness. And I think AI comes in there as well when you're building cognitive services like vision and and being able to then incorporate that coupled with robotics to sort of as an enabler for even more capability and unlocking more automation out of it. And then there's also simulation. So building in AI into, taking massive streams of data and then creating a digital twin of the factory floor or so on. Those are also very, very key sort of roles that AI would play. What is an underpinning here is that AI is a very accessible technology now. You have providers like Microsoft making this technology available to students, making it available to just, get started and start building. And when you look at what is underpinning that technology, it's massive amounts of compute power, and so this cloud enablement it really unlocks that capability. And then finally, one major point is that we also have to connect all of this to profit. I mean, the way that these things move is that if a manufacturer in Trinidad and Tobago connects this sort of level of automation with, of course, increased profit, then of course they're going to fund learning programs. They're going to hire the Virtanas. They're going to then make sure that and use, and that money then filters in and starts building capability building, because then the investment is there. And so in trying to connect it to that profit, of course, there is where we have to influence on strategy. We have to be able to prove, right, that these technologies can save, can increase profits, can increase production, can increase sort of control, and there that capability is where there's a lot of partnership that needs to come in between the private sector as well, government, and then all of the education institutions there as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed. I'm just checking now into the question and answer section on the screen, and I see we have some more questions from our participants. The first question is, and this is for all three of you, of course, right? Is there a way that we can apply this technology to sports in Trinidad and Tobago? And if yes, how? I'm guessing you're referring to robotics here, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think sports is one of those industries that does have a lot of money being invested into it, which I think is a good thing. And I think I'm new to the Caribbean, but I've quickly learned as much as I can about cricket and trying to get much more familiar, at least with that space. But I mean, with any of these, there's computer vision, for instance, so tracking where the ball is moving, where players are moving. There's putting sensors in the bats, putting sensors in like the bowler's wrist. There's like a lot of things that can be done here. There's even just forget about robotics completely. Like we're at a big data forum right now. Like just use the data from all these matches to make smarter decisions about players and how to do lineups and things like that. People talk about Moneyball in the United States when it comes to American baseball. And a lot of those same approaches can be used in sports like cricket or other relevant sports in the Caribbean.
Yeah, I mean, in any industry, I mean, we see it always as transformation comes from four things, right? So in terms of, so the first one is to engage the actual employees better. So in sports, of course, the employees are either the teams themselves or even the business of sports, right? Which is the franchises, like a 2020 franchise. So when you look at that empowerment of the team, you have to think of, well, okay, how would technology change a batsman? So technology can absolutely change a batsman if he had access to more data on his stride or his hit rates or his, his form or her form, I should say. And then also engaging, the second one is engaging customers. So how does technology engage the audience more? And here we get into of course, business of sports. How is it marketed? What sort of social analytics are being done? What artificial intelligence can we apply to that? So to engage the audience better so that we attract them more. The third one is optimizing the operations itself. So things like ticket sales or again, technology can be applied to improve on the efficiency of doing that, the reach of that. Technology could be applied to the reach to global audiences and so on. And then the final one is on transforming the product itself. And so here in sports, the product is, the sport itself, the franchises and that sort of thing. So how do we change that into a sort of digital product? And when you look at the evolution of, let's say, 2020 cricket, the way that the brand has evolved over time, you would see that there is a lot of digital aspects of it in terms of, the way that the transmissibility, the advertising, who you source, the promotion on the internet, the amount of, data that's put out there, all of that is all key. So once you're looking at any industry, so not just sports, you could also go, the way we see it is that you can look at these four things and then technology, I'm sure, fits into all of those. And those four things will lead to transformation.
Thank you. Mr. Rahaman, anything to add?
No, nothing to add. I think my co-panelists did a really great job in covering pretty much everything.
All right, let's just move on to the next question. I'm having a question here from a participant who says that a glossed over part of this conversation is the critical need for entrepreneurship to create opportunities for technically skilled persons to get or create jobs and solve the big, hairy problems. What resources and policies in both government and corporates are needed to stimulate the entrepreneurship side of Caribbean residents, to build the entrepreneurial community that can make use of the various technologies and create the clusters that have been mentioned?
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in there a little bit. I didn't talk about entrepreneurship so much, mostly because it's sort of a natural progression that comes from trying to solve a lot of these challenging problems. But yeah, you're right. I definitely glossed over it in part of my talk there. And when we talk about what's needed to actually stimulate this, one thing to remember is that there's actually quite a few grants that are available for people that are trying to start some of these new businesses. Like there's opportunities, Caribbean Export Development Agency, the Caribbean Development Bank, the IDB, I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple as well here. The European Union has grants as well, but through all of these, there are opportunities to kind of get started, get off the ground, and many ways to actually to build these businesses. It might not even be you as an entrepreneur trying to get this grant, because it can be hard to get a grant as starting a new business, but you work with another business that already exists that's trying to solve a problem, and they get the grant, and then they work with you to help solve the problem. And that way you know that you're actually tackling something that's solving an actual need. And I think the piece that's really most important, and I talked about it today, was just getting out there and trying to solve problems. If we wait around for other stakeholders to sort of put everything on a silver platter for us, we might be waiting for a really long time. And I think it's really important for us to just like get out there and do it and solve problems that'll actually have an impact.
Yes, indeed. Anybody else on the panel would like to take a stab at this, or should we move to the next question?
I mean, I would say that, I see, we have an oil and gas economy, right? And there's a lot of talk every year about diversification. I think the pandemic is helping this dialogue. I think it's helping the conversation, because here in the last budget read, you saw a lot of incentives for SMEs, coming out on, in terms of the number of years of tax-free operation and so on. We're seeing a lot of, digital incentives for entrepreneurs to start their business. I'm really proud of Trinidad and Tobago in terms of the pace of innovation that we've seen during the pandemic. Quickly, we saw a lot of apps starting to launch with, making sure that they can do delivery, contactless delivery, contactless payments. So here, I feel that there was a lot of entrepreneurship happening. A lot of young people came out, went to market. Yes, I mean, we've had failures, but we've also had a lot of successes. And that's entrepreneurship really in a thing. I mean, I once worked at an oil and gas company, and I left to start up a company. And I could tell you that entrepreneurship is hard. I mean, the first 3 years, I mean, you're employee number one, but you're chief cook, bottle washer. I did all my taxes. I did everything. And, and a key to it, yes, I mean, you're looking for support, but at the end of the day, it's a lot about you and the motivation for doing it and getting it there. The technology clearly is there. It's at your fingertips now with the cloud technologies that are available. So it's a matter of that motivation. Yes, the tax incentives are going to help, but when you look at how difficult it is and how much work is involved, it really requires, that sort of inner strength to just face adversity, move on, and keep going. And I'm pretty sure it will yield, success once that's there.
And when you talk about entrepreneurship being hard, Darren, it just makes me think a little bit more about sort of our culture over at Virtana. And at Virtana, I mean, I would love if all of our employees stuck around for the next 10 or 20 years doing really impactful work, but I would be just as excited or even more excited if one of our employees resigned with the goal of actually starting another company in Trinidad and Tobago. Because that's just good for everyone. It's even good for us as a company if there's other companies in this ecosystem that are doing this transformative work. And I would urge other business owners and corporations in Trinidad and Tobago to encourage that mindset. And if people are really set on like doing something and kind of branching out, like help them do it. And it'll come around and probably help your business in some way at some point in the future too. And I think we just need to be collaborative about these things. And it's really hard, so we need to help all. We need existing businesses and corporations to help the entrepreneurs through this entire process, because it definitely isn't easy.
Thank you. We are now down to the last 5 minutes of our session, and I have two questions from the audience regarding education and studying at UV and what to choose. So the first question is, which aspect of research or what other areas of study should a first-year UV student doing a bachelor's in computer science pursue if they have an interest in robotics and machine learning? That is one question. And the second one is, what opportunities would you say are available to recent engineering graduates? Maybe Mr. Rahaman, we can start with you since you are at UV and both teaching and studying, I would say.
So the first thing I would always recommend in terms of trying to make a career in this space would be to focus quite a bit on mathematics. Mathematics is the bedrock of computer science, artificial intelligence, and robotics. And to be able to, do these sort of, to innovate in this space, you need to have a sound mathematical background. You need to have that mathematical maturity. If you're going to build upon, let's say, a research paper, some of the mathematics in these research papers can be quite heavy and quite hairy. So you would need to ensure that you have that sort of background to, take those mathematical aspects of your degree quite seriously. I would also think it's useful as well to start learning to read. I guess coming from something of an academic, start developing the skill. Paper reading is a skill. So how you read research papers, that's a skill. And I would just actually start doing that from as soon as possible, and to cultivate the skill of being able to keep your thumb on the pulse of what's going on in the wider international community in robotics and artificial intelligence. That itself is an important skill that I would suggest trying to cultivate and develop. Depending on the particular area you'd like to actually specialize in. If data science and using AI in industry is something that a student is interested in, I would suggest actually learning some economics. I think that's really important. If the robotics space is where you'd like to go, then learning some electronics and some physics would definitely come in handy in that space.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We just have 3 minutes left. Let me just try to get at least one more question in. There's only 2 left, but let me try to get one in. Is the high fixed cost of automation viable in the low and variable demand landscape in the Caribbean?
Yeah, I mean, I can contribute to here. I mean, the cost of automation is actually going down. You could just think of the number of sensors in your smartphone alone, and you can tell that the cost of these sensors are actually going down. They're getting cheaper. That's actually opening up. I mean, IoT in itself is opening up, a whole new level of transformation that is enabled by the fact that it's more affordable. And again, once you connect it to the profit of the company and they can understand, okay, how much did this automation actually save me? And then extend that, going out, no matter what it costs, once that, that profitability increase is going to be more than the investment, and then multiplied over time, you're going to get the justification that you need to make the investment. I don't know, Vijay, if you want to jump in here because you have experience in this as well.
Sure. As one example, yeah, we've been trying to work on a new product with pharmacies for counting pills, and our original answer was building some big machine that could like move pills around and dispense them like a big vending machine, and that started getting really, really expensive. So we turned out just building something that is much, much cheaper, much, much smaller, that helps pharmacists actually do their job. So sometimes automation can come in many different flavors, like something that's really big with a lot of capital costs, maybe something really small, more IoT oriented, like what Darren said, or maybe it's fully software completely. Like if we talk about variable demand in manufacturing, maybe the focus here should be on developing a system that helps track what they have in stock, what that company needs to order, and what are their shipments, and try to predict demand using machine learning. And now you're actually not even buying any equipment. And I think there are creative ways to still address automation without all of that cost that we often think of with robotics.
Thank you very much. So the last question, even though we're down in the last minute, but let's just ask it. We have a lot of access to software solutions, tools, and expertise. But in this part of the world, hardware development is lagging when it comes to robotics. Things like the availability of components and companies with design expertise are obstacles here. What strategies can we use to support the development of this area?
Yeah, I mean, here I would point to simulation tools. I mean, simulation tools cost nothing, right? I mean, they, and here you're building skill, you know, using these tools, and there, you know, there's wide applications to them and wide availability to simulation without actually having to get to the hardware. Now, the simulations themselves, you know, can mimic any very expensive piece of hardware. I mean, yes, the, you know, university labs and so on need modernization, and again, Vijay spoke to grants around this, you know, and we hope that there would be more. But then keep in mind that there's always simulation where things are out of reach, where education is concerned.
Yeah, and I do think it's a valid concern too. I mean, simulation is one great way of getting started here. But if someone came out and said, "Hey, I'm going to build this totally brand new type of robot arm with custom motors and custom sensors in this like carbon fiber body frame that is totally custom made," like that's really hard and that takes a lot of money, and we don't have that expertise. But maybe we find niches within that entire vertical that are more accessible. So maybe just picking one of them, like maybe we could talk about, instead of designing an entire robot arm, we think about designing a new type of gearbox that makes robots more efficient. Or we come up with a new type of motor that has a higher torque output. That most of that work would actually be in simulation of modeling those electromagnetic fields. But maybe we start with some of those more niche areas that still have value and international relevance, and then go to much larger systems. And that's that, or relying on international partners as well would be another way of doing it.
Gentlemen, thank you all very, very much. We are slightly over time. I would have loved to extend this session and answer a couple of more questions that have been coming in. But unfortunately, in less than 7 minutes, we have our final session of the day with Facebook. I would like to invite everybody to come and join that. Meta Facebook, their Data for Good research manager, is giving a presentation. I hope to see you all there. But for now, Mr. Pradeep, Mr. Mohammed, Mr. Rahaman, thank you so much for this very engaged discussion and presentation. I'm sure everybody that's been participating here thoroughly enjoyed it, as well as the discussion. Thank you so much for participating. And as I said, all of you are invited. Please join us in less than 7 minutes now for the final presentation of day 1 of the Big Data Forum. Thank you so much for participating, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you all.